Oh my goodness, what have I drug in this time? I was at the Restore recently and got a few cool things. One being this very old, kind of tattered, but still very nice footstool for my dad chair that I'm sitting in right now. And the other, this vintage Kenmore dehumidifier. And if you've been watching me for a long time, and if you have a really good memory, this dehumidifier might almost look oddly familiar to you. For indeed, this is basically a slightly newer, slightly cosmetically upgraded version of a vintage Sears dehumidifier that my grandparents had that I made a video of a long time ago. This is a Sears Cold Spot portable dehumidifier. I don't know when this was made, but if I had to guess, this is probably from the 1960s. Originally, my grandparents are the original owners, so this thing's been here all its life since it was brand new. So I'm really happy to have found this dehumidifier. I paid 20 bucks for it, and I've been looking for one for a long time. Unsuccessfully looking on Facebook Marketplace and stuff for a used one just because new ones are so expensive. But I've been not just wanting one, needing one for a very specific reason. A lot of my belongings are stored in my mom's basement, and mom has a lot of her stuff in the basement too. And unfortunately, in the hot, humid summers, it gets extremely humid in that basement. So humid that things will actually get wet on some days. And it's not a good feeling, let me tell you, when you go down there and I look at one of my vintage computers and it has droplets of water on it. That's how bad it gets. So I've been needing a dehumidifier for a long time. So when I saw this one, and I immediately recognized it as basically being the same one my grandparents had, I snapped it right up for 20 bucks. Hell yeah. Well worth the chance to take and hope that it works. So I have no idea when this would have been made. If I had to guess, 80s, maybe even 70s, I'm not sure. It's missing the humidistat knob, but what I'm hoping is, well, I've already tried it and it doesn't fit as is, but I'm hoping maybe I can make it fit. This is the knob from my 1960s Eaton portable heater that I had to throw away because it developed a failure that couldn't be repaired. This is the knob from that, and the knob actually does fit on the shaft there, but this opening is too small, so it doesn't actually reach. So I may go ahead and actually see if I can drill out this hole bigger so that it actually fits inside, and then I'll have a knob for it. Funny enough, the humidity in my mom's basement is probably why that heater developed that failure. Just one of the springs that keeps the heating element taut rusted so badly that it lost its springiness. So I'm hoping this thing works and I can put it to work in the summer in my mom's basement. But we're going to find out today. I have not plugged this thing in. I have no idea of its working condition. In hindsight, I actually should have plugged it in the store. I probably could have done that, but I wasn't really thinking of that. I was just too excited to finally find not only a dehumidifier, but a cool vintage one too. I mean, this thing is wood grain city. So, I think the first thing I'm going to do is, this thing is really filthy. It's got what I suspect may be some mold on it. So I'm going to take the cleaner and I'm going to give this thing a real good scrub down just on the outside for a start. And then we'll come back. Ugh, so much disgusting yellowish brown stuff came off this thing. There's still a lot more to go, but at least I have a slightly less chance of contracting a horrible disease now if I touch this thing. So where do we start? I don't know if I should just plug it in right away. Maybe that's what we do. I just plug it in right away and make sure the thing actually kicks on. Actually, I think this front panel, which is plastic, just pops right off by the looks of it. Yeah, it does. It just pops right off. So let's get this out of the way. Oh, it's tethered by the cord. Ugh, more gross, horrible stuff. I don't even know. Oh, it's got a hose. Oh, it's got a hose hookup on it. I didn't know that. That's excellent. Perfect. That'll be perfect for Mom's basement if her hose fits. Humidistat knob turns. Does it click? It does click. Ugh. Well, none of the wires look chewed by creatures or anything like that, so maybe let's just plug this thing in and make sure it works before we put any more work into it. I'm kind of nervous. I hope it doesn't explode. And stand back a bit. Contact. Okay. It's drawing 300 watts. And it's working. Sounds fine, actually. Sounds great. See. See if we can feel this getting cold. It does appear to be getting cold. Now it is very dry in here, so it's quite possible that it's not going to be able to not going to be able to condense any water from the air. But I'm just going to let it sit here, make sure this gets undoubtedly cold. Oh, it is too. There's ice starting to form on it. Okay, we're good. Cool. Well, I'll just leave it running for a few minutes anyway, just to check it out, and then we'll come back. Well, it's been running for a couple of minutes here. Seems to work just fine. Very cold on the condenser. Let's see if the humidistat turns it off. Does quite the rattling, but it does shut off. And what I remember from my grandparents was that it had a very interesting safety on the compressor. If the compressor doesn't start on a modern air conditioner or refrigerator or whatever, if the compressor tries to start and it doesn't, it won't try again for another like 10 minutes or so. But on my grandparents' dehumidifier, it would try to start the compressor, it would click on and off and on and off every couple of seconds. So I wonder if this does the same thing. Yes, it does. And there it goes. Kind of neat behavior. Certainly gets the compressor up and running quickly compared to a modern unit. And the ice that formed on the condenser has turned into liquid water. There's a droplet right there. So, okay. Shut it off here. It is doing the dehumidifying thing. So good. This thing works. I guess the next thing to do is clean it further because it's pretty gosh darn disgusting in there. So here's what the back of the unit looks like, and I think this plastic panel's held on with these 4 screws. We'll see what the tub looks like. Make sure it's got no cracks in it. Once again, it's pretty gross. Oh, look at that. We got a droplet of water in it. Pretty gross looking, but I don't see any cracks. And then in there we should see, yep, there's the float that shuts it off once the tub gets full. And then down there, the info plate. I wonder if there's a data manufacturer. I can't even see anything on this info plate. I think it says 20 pints per 24 hours. That's the same capacity as the one my grandparents had. This is definitely the exact same thing as what my grandparents had. It's just slightly newer and branded Kenmore instead of Sears. Put that in so it doesn't drip onto the metal chassis. Let me take these screws out and we'll take this plastic panel off, and I think that should give us access to the compressor. So maybe there's a data manufacturer on that. Well, there's inside the back panel, there's the compressor. Massive compressor compared to a modern dehumidifier, I think. Mounted on these rubber grommets. And I don't know if you can see back there. Let me see if I can gain you up. There's the fan. How does the fan spin? It obviously works fine. Oh, that's fine. That's very fine. I don't think I have to oil that even. Very nice. I wonder if I can wipe some grime off this compressor. See a data manufacturer. I see what appears to say Canada on it. Yuck. This whole thing is gross. This must have lived in a basement. But by golly, it stood the test of time. Hopefully I get a long time more of service out of it. Gross. Let me get a flashlight and look in there. So I've done some digging, both inside this thing and online, and I really haven't come up with much. When I searched for pictures of Kenmore, vintage Kenmore dehumidifiers and vintage Sears dehumidifiers, what I found were, I didn't find a single picture of a dehumidifier of this particular style. I found lots of pictures of another vintage style that's apparently from the late 80s, which is funny because it actually looks older than this style, but it must be newer. But yeah, I didn't really find anything online. I found that the compressor is made by Tecumseh, which I didn't expect. I forgot they made refrigeration compressors. And if you look right here, it also says R12 on it. So this has the old R12 refrigerant. Horrible for the environment if it escapes. I'm glad we don't use it anymore. But the stuff works damn good. So it's cool to see this thing that has the old R12 refrigerant. I wiped a ton of dirt off this label, and it says 6 amps, 8.5 ounces of R12 refrigerant and a capacity of 20 pints per 24 hours. The fan motor was made by FSP, which is sort of an old manufacturer of motors. They used to make motors for like box fans and stuff. I think they're still around and make motors for other like appliance applications like range hoods and stuff like that. So I haven't really found much in terms of when this was made. Something I just thought of that I want to make sure works is that the float works. Although I'm going to use this thing with a hose, if I can, I would just like to see that the float works, hopefully. So, yes it does. Okay. Cool. Yeah, this thing is disgusting inside. It's really horrible. I want to see if I can get this cabinet off. It looks like it screws off from the chassis with some screws. I'm just not sure how to handle this part here, which is riveted to the chassis. I don't know if I can take these screws off and leave the switch panel in place while I take the cabinet off, or if there's going to be something else that holds it up. I will take a look and give it a shot and see what I can do. Aha! I just got a nugget of information. I took the switch box out. It's a Honeywell part. Very nice. And I bet that's a date code, 52nd week of 1976. Could be. And there it is, freed from its cabinet. And this thing is horrifyingly disgusting. Yeah, I'm gonna have to see how much I can clean this thing. The biggest issue is that you can see this radiator here is just clogged with dirt. And that's a problem because, you know how I talked about how frost pretty much started immediately collecting on the condenser here, or maybe this is the evaporator. I don't friggin' know refrigeration stuff. Technology connections, that's his department. But this was immediately frosting up, which actually shouldn't be happening. It should be able to stay above the temperature of freezing so that it gets cold, but not frozen, so that water can condense and then drip off of it and into the collection tub. But the problem is, because this radiator is so clogged with dirt, the fan, which pulls air in that direction so that room temperature air flows across this to keep it warm, with that radiator clogged, there's not enough airflow, so it was able to just freeze right up. And I remember that being the issue with my grandparents' one, and I never knew why it did that. You know, you'd run it for half an hour or something, and you'd come back, and this would just be a block of ice, and you'd have no choice but to just turn it off and let it thaw. And it's because it was due to the same issue. This is just so clogged with dirt. And it's kind of worrisome because I'm not sure how I can get like deep in there to clean it without accidentally breaking something. I'm afraid, see, refrigeration systems are kind of delicate when you're poking around inside them like this. I remember almost 20 years ago, my mom had a deep freezer, and it was upstairs in the house, and she hired somebody to move it down into the basement. The deep freezer worked fine when it was upstairs. A couple of guys carried it down into the basement, and it never worked again. It would turn on and run, but it wouldn't get cold. The mere act of moving it down a set of stairs caused one of the refrigeration lines to break, and it leaked all the refrigerant out, and that was the end of it. And so this thing's almost half a century old. And you know, I'm worried about doing the same thing. I mean, you look at some of these copper lines that have a little bit of discoloration on them, and you're really worried about accidentally breaking something. But this thing will never work well unless I can get this radiator clean. So I will have to maybe do some reading and see what's the best way to tackle this. There seems to be quite a few other videos on YouTube of people restoring these vintage dehumidifiers. People just love the vintage refrigeration stuff, and I do too. So maybe I'll look at some of those, see what people do to get these things cleaned up. Welcome back. It's 4 hours, 5 hours later, I'm not even sure. But I have spent the whole time cleaning this thing. This thing was so critically packed with dirt that it never would have worked correctly had I not spent the time and effort that I have cleaning it. And I still could have done a lot more, but I think I got the bulk of it. It would have been diminishing returns at this point. And I think I've got it good enough that it should work well. So here's what I did. First of all, visually, you can already see that it's a lot cleaner. I started by actually removing the fan completely. This terminal block, everything is plugged in with spade connectors, which is nice. So to remove the fan, there's just two nuts here to come out. But in order to clear this cardboard thing, or whatever it is, you have to remove this white bracket as well. So there's two bolts down there and two bolts on the other side. Undo those as well so you can tilt the whole assembly back and get the fan out and up. The fan actually has oil ports for both the front and back bearings, so I put a couple of drops of oil in each of those. And as you can see, I completely wiped down the motor and I removed the blade assembly and I cleaned that up as well, scrubbed that down with Simple Green. And then while I had the fan out, the first thing I did to try and clean, because the radiator here is what was so packed full of dirt, and it's really critical that it's kept clean. I started by taking a paintbrush and a vacuum and just brushing the dirt and vacuuming it, but of course you can't get in very many places on this radiator. And kind of a deficiency in the design of this thing compared to modern dehumidifiers and air conditioners and the like is that modern stuff has the radiator on the front and this part behind it, whereas on this it's backwards, which makes it really hard to really dig into the radiator to clean it. So I did what I could with the paintbrush, got some dirt out, but not very much at all. And then while I had the fan out, I had kind of a light bulb moment, and what I did was I took my bottle of Simple Green, and since I had this fan out and I had free access to this side of the radiator, I just took my bottle of Simple Green, I put the tub in, took my bottle of Simple Green, covered everything with this, with a plastic bag, and just sprayed the crap out of this radiator. And I also sprayed through here, and I sprayed in here, and I sprayed from above, and I spent probably over an hour just spraying the crap out of this thing, and the most dark brown water ever coming out of this drain port and into the tub. And when I was all done, I did this for an hour. I used most of my bottle of Simple Green. I would have used the whole bottle except the pump trigger broke. But I used most of my bottle of Simple Green, and then I filled another bottle with tap water and just started spraying this all over again with tap water for probably 20 minutes to rinse all the Simple Green out. And when I was done, I was still getting brown water out of the drain, but not quite as brown. But here's a picture of everything that was in the tub. That's mostly Simple Green and a little bit of water and a whole lot of dirt. And I can shine a flashlight through this radiator now, see the light on the other side. So I think we're okay. And I hope that Simple Green doesn't turn out to have some sort of property that corrodes, these fine copper lines and stuff. Hopefully not. But I got everything back together, fans back in, it's plugged back in. I think everything's plugged in the right place. And obviously it's still a little bit damp from everything I just did, but I want to run this thing. I want to make sure it still functions, and also I want to get that fan spinning to dry everything out. So I'm going to hit the power button and hope it doesn't explode again. Oh, and I've got the switch assembly just hanging in this plastic bag, so that should be okay too. Here we go. Okay. And like I said, it's already dry in here. The humidity is only 41% in here right now. Maybe I'll open an outside window, just get some outside air, because it's actually it's damper outside right now than it is inside. But I'm just gonna let this thing run for a while, dry everything out, and verify that everything is still working good, and then we'll come back. While this thing's been running, I've just been cleaning the cabinet, and I discovered there's a wiring diagram in here, which is cool. And I noticed something interesting, which kind of tracks with the way this has been behaving, which I thought was interesting. What I noticed was that, I'm going to be very gentle moving this. What I've noticed is that once the entire evaporator becomes cold, the compressor shuts off, but the fan keeps running. Whereas if the humidistat had clicked off, both the fan and the compressor would have shut off. And so it turns out that there's basically they call it a de-icer circuit. I think this guy right here is a thermal switch, and when the evaporator coil gets cold enough, that switch opens and it shuts the compressor off. And it makes me wonder if this wasn't working on my grandparents' unit, and that's why the evaporator would become just a solid block of ice. Not sure. I'm sure theirs needed to be cleaned too, though. But yeah, this thing's just been turning on and off based on this switch rather than based on the humidistat, which is good. It prevents this from icing up, and every time the compressor shuts off, it pretty quickly melts and the water drips into the pan. So seems to be working pretty well. I've got the cabinet cleaned up, so I might as well shut this thing off and reassemble it. And there she is, down on the floor. Everyone do the dinosaur. This turned out pretty well. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I was kind of worried when I saw the amount of dirt that this thing was packed with. I really wasn't sure if I was ever going to be able to get it performing right. And as it is, I still haven't cleaned it quite as thoroughly as a professional would. But what I'm hoping is I've cleaned it out well enough for it to work and not to kill me with some sort of horrible respiratory infection in the process. But yeah, I'm really glad to have this thing. I think it cleaned up pretty well. It was quite clearly the first time in this thing's entire life that it's been cleaned. And I'm happy that it was I who found it, because I think if another ordinary person had found this, what they would have found was that they would have turned it on and it wouldn't have worked very well, if at all, because of the amount of dirt in the radiator. And they probably would have just put it out on the curb. So hopefully I've been able to give this thing a second life. And this will be deployed in Mom's basement, and I'm very happy for that my search, hopefully my search for a dehumidifier has finally come to an end. I still didn't solve the switch situation, but if it's going to sit in a basement, I mean, presumably the humidistat is going to work well enough that I can just set it once with a pair of pliers and just leave it there for the whole summer or whatever. But there you go. That is a Kenmore dehumidifier from 1976. Bought from the Restore for $20 in really horribly filthy shape. I've put an entire afternoon and part of an evening into cleaning it up, and it's showing some real promise. It's doing what it's supposed to do, and hopefully long term, once it goes into Mom's basement, it'll help keep the basement drier, keep our stuff stored down there safe. So very, very happy to have this. And of course, it's another almost half-century old appliance saved from the trash. So I'm always happy about that. And if you like how I sounded in today's video, please let me know. I'm using a new lapel mic that I just got my hands on. It's a Audio-Technica AT831B, and this is my first time using it. I still have my old wireless lapel mic, but I haven't used that in quite a while. This mic's nice because it's wired and it runs off the phantom power of the camcorder, no battery required, so it's very nice in that way. But this is my first time using it. If you like how I sound, let me know and I may use it in future videos. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.